Everybody. Hey guys, it's Mama T. Thank you guys so much for coming back to my channel. We have finally made it. We have made it successfully to the finale of this Mr. McMahon series, appropriately titled for this last episode, The Finish. You have hopefully watched this entire series with me breaking down each episode about this docu-series that talks about Vince McMahon, the not the creator necessarily, but the main face behind the World Wrestling Entertainment conglomerate division mega million thing. So the first five episodes, obviously, one of my big complaints is that I don't feel like we're getting a good glimpse into who Vince McMahon is as a person. We all looked at that last episode when they talked about his family. This episode, the finish, it is kind of more of the same. It kind of delves into a few different things. Like they still talk about family, primarily the relationship between him and his son, which very closely mimics the relationship that Vince had with his own father. There's also a section in there about CTE, which is a big hot button topic when it comes to the NFL and studying the brains of NFL players and concussions and how that really impacts the behavior of an NFL player is a hot button topic in wrestling as well. After one of the wrestlers did something completely horrible, and they believe it was attributed to CTE, and then it kind of goes to the present where it talks about this man and all of the sexual all these allegations about sexual abuse, sexual assault, and trafficking, which I wasn't even aware of this. I was again, I haven't watched wrestling in a really long time, so I had no idea that he was under investigation for anything. That never came across my news feed, and apparently all this stuff took place relatively recently. Pardon me. He stepped down officially in January 2024, so this year. But before I get into my review and recap of the last episode, make sure that you like this video, share this video with friends, family, enemies, whoever you think would be interested in learning about it. Make sure you comment below. Make sure you subscribe to my channel. We're going to get into the last episode again called The Finish. Like every other episode, Vince McMahon talks about WrestleMania, and apparently there's a WrestleMania in 2007 where he faced off against who we know as 45, Donald Trump. They faced off against him in a hair match, and whoever lost the match would have to shave their head. And basically, he was trying to come up with any and everything to get people to continue to watch wrestling after Stone Cold left, after The Rock left, after I don't know, John Cena had left at that time, but basically the really big mega stars that we all knew and loved to brought so much money to WWE had all left for whatever reason. And they needed a way to continue to get people interested in watching it. So that's what they did for WrestleMania. I was like, okay, I guess. And I put that as a thing that really scraping the barrel. And then after Stone Cold left, they were like, okay, well, Vince doesn't have this adversary to face anymore because before the whole thing was Stone Cold against Vince McMahon, this big bad boss figure against the guy who's very anti-establishment. Now that Stone Cold was gone, Vince didn't have anybody to play off of, so he really hammed up his character, and he had this brilliant idea that, oh, let's have my character die, and let's have a funeral for him. So there was this whole skit of him like getting into his limousine and then the limo like blowing up. And people didn't really know if it was real. I mean, obviously it wasn't, but this is the storyline that he crafted in his head. And the day they were going to have the funeral is the day they got the news about Chris Benoit. Now, if you don't know who Chris Benoit is, if you again are watching this series just because you like my face and you like hearing me talk about things, you never really watched wrestling like that, Chris Benoit was a pretty popular wrestler, I think. I remember him as a wrestler. I think I remember liking his wrestling style. He seems to be very serious about his craft, very technical. He didn't seem to be a person who really hammed it up with a camera. He wasn't silly or goofy. He seemed to be kind of very serious and straight-laced. So he basically got news that he and his wife and his son had all died. And so, of course, the wrestling world just shook this before all the actual facts came out about what happened. But all they knew was that, oh my gosh, this wrestler has passed away, and his wife and his son, his young son. So they had this whole tribute to Chris Benoit, and they played, like, I think one of the days they were supposed to have, like, a live show. Instead, they just played homage to him, as you would for a coworker who has passed away. And so the day after that happened, or I guess while that tribute was airing, they found out all the details about Chris Benoit and his family in the case. Basically, He had, I want to say, strangled his wife. He had suffocated his son, and then he had killed himself. And so obviously once that came out, whenever it comes to something like that, of course you're going to kind of detach yourself from it and you don't want to be associated with it. It's like, oh, well, now that I know the facts, oh, no, we don't know nothing about him. We don't know who he is. And there was a guy who was a former wrestler. I think his name was Chris Nowitzki, I believe. And he was a wrestler. He got a concussion, and he started. And this was like, I guess, around the Chris Benoit case, around Chris Benoit's death. And he started thinking about CTE. And I wrote down what it stands for: chronic traumatic encephalopathy. I think I said that pretty decently. I just verified myself. It's caused by constant hits to the head. And so while he was researching that, the news media attributed Chris Benoit's actions to steroids, but then, like, well, people, everybody wants to blame something on, well, I don't say everyone wants to blame something. When something like that happens, you have to find someone to blame, not just Chris Benoit, but it's like, no, something drove him to do that. Steroids, I think, is a pretty easy thing to kind of blame it on. I don't think there's any proof that he was on steroids, and there's no proof that it really led to him having this kind of reaction. And I think in those kind of situations, everyone involved is gone, so you're never really going to know the actual answers. And because Chris Nowitzki was so interested in CTE, he talked to Chris Benoit's father, and his father allowed Chris Nowitzki to actually study Chris Benoit's brain. And based off of the look of his brain, it's confirmed, that he confirms rather, that he actually had CTE. And at that time, again, right now it's a hot button issue in the NFL, but this is back in like the early 2000s or late 2000s. So it was still something that wasn't talked about that often, wasn't really researched that often in any of the sports fields. Now it's more, I think it's treated a lot more respectably now. People take it a little more seriously now, but back then, no one really talked about it. And this man originally just kind of dismissed it, like, no, it was like our wrestlers, they take care of themselves. That can't be the case. Some people are just nuts. And like the fact that was his answer was very callous, but then he kind of cleaned it up. And after hearing about CTE, he was like, okay, I want to dismiss it as CTE is not a thing. So let me get more research. So he invited Chris Nowitzki to come to him to educate him on CTE. And after that, they started making a few changes in wrestling just to kind of make sure that the wrestlers were quote unquote taken care of. So one of the things they did was, if you guys remember, if you watched wrestling back in the day, they used to have like ladders, tables, and chairs matches where you would take the folding chair and hit somebody over the head. They did away with that. Wrestlers weren't allowed to do that anymore. And he also limited how many matches that the wrestlers could actually do. So playing instead of being in matches like every single night or however many times a week, they kind of decreased that a little bit so that the wrestlers weren't putting themselves in danger more. Which I thought was interesting. It's like, after all this time, you just now had decreased their hours. I thought that was kind of strange. And I know wrestling is all about the money. Like, I get it, but it's like, oh my God. Let's see, what else? And it's also at a time where they mentioned a lot of deaths that took place with WWE, with wrestlers who had all died before they were 40. Now, obviously, the circumstances were all a little bit different. Some of them had heart conditions. So I think one person, a couple people, I think, kind of OD'd. And so it was a lot that happened, but I don't feel like that can be attributed necessarily to wrestling, because in one of the interviews that Vince McMahon did back in that day, they asked him outright, like, how do you feel about the fact that all these men under 40 had died and they were your employees? So it's almost like they're trying to get Vince to admit some kind of guilt. And I understood him getting defensive. It's like, I didn't do anything. I didn't put the needle on that person's arm. I didn't, like, give this person a heart condition. I didn't could have handled the situation a little bit better, but I understand him getting defensive, because this person is coming at him basically trying to get something out of him and trying to make him admit to something he didn't do. And then outside of this one person, you have all these other media who are coming down on WWE for practices, for whatever. So I understood it, but it's like, okay, you gotta. I don't think somebody ever had media training, and I feel like all these years in the business, you should have media training by now, dog. Like, you talk to media all the freaking time. I don't get it, but what the heck do I know? I'm not in the business, right? So, okay, some of the stuff was more. So, WWE, they switched their ratings. They used to be TV 14. Now they're TV PG. So now they're a little more family friendly. They have more sponsorships. They're making a lot more money. Some people kind of miss like the Attitude Era, where things were a little rough and rugged, and a little more obscene. But it's like, we don't want that no more. Because again, it's about a business, right? So you got to continue to grow your business in whatever way that looks like. And sometimes that means making it a little more mature for grown men. Sometimes it means taming it down a little bit to give the young kids that the young kids can grow with these wrestlers, and you're creating new lifelong fans of the genre. And so, and then another thing that happened around this time is that the fans, this has been my beef with this whole series. Not beef, but one of the lingering things I keep talking about is women in wrestling and how there hasn't really been the only thing talked about is how the women were exploited, and they had the bra and panties matches and all this stuff, but they really only had one, maybe two women who have been interviewed this entire series. And even this last episode, we still didn't really get a gist of these women and just kind of the athletic prowess some of them had to have. So that still isn't really mentioned at all. And I guess in light of all of the allegations against the man, it makes sense. But that's one thing that was kind of missing from me. So one of the things they talked about, which I didn't know was a thing, the fans apparently started this hashtag "Give Divas a Chance" because they wanted to see more women wrestling. And when women wrestled, like you still had higher ratings, and it wasn't just women wearing being scantily clad. It was just women being athletes, right? I mean, it's the same way that the WNBA of the past 18 months, 2 years has gotten this resurgence of popularity. The women have gotten this resurgence of sponsorships, and they're making more money, and their faces and their names. Before maybe only knew a couple, people now, right? And it's proof that people want to see a good show, whether it's men, women, whoever. You want to see a good show, you want to see good athletes doing what they need to do. So that's interesting. And Stephanie McMahon was behind it and making sure that she was a big proponent. She advocated for them. So I thought it was interesting because I didn't know anything about that. And then they talk about Shane. So let me say this: this man has two kids, Shane and Stephanie, right? We know that Mr. McMahon had, I don't know if he had any siblings, we never talked about having siblings, but we know that his father, Mr. McMahon senior, that he was a big wrestling promoter as well. Vince did not meet him until he was 12 years old. He and his dad did not have one of those loving relationships. It was more like, oh, hey, son, here's the business. Let's start you from the bottom floor, and you can work your way up. Oh, you might do this? I don't know, son. I'm just kind of hesitant. I don't really want to do anything new. You think you can run my business? Okay, I'll give you a chance. Everything was very business oriented. There was no, I don't want to say there's no love, because, I wasn't in the heart of his dad, but there was not affection. There was not, my personal opinion, there was not an actual desire or effort to actually parent. And I feel like if you are someone who has never been parented by your dad, you have claims that your mom was sexually abusive, you have a stepfather who was physically abusive, you didn't have that example at all of what it meant to be a parent. He got married when he was 17, 18 years old, but it doesn't say how old he was before he became a father. Either way, your father was alive when you became a dad yourself, I think. I'm almost positive he was. But again, you still didn't have that example. So if you don't have that example of what it means to be a father, if you don't have a living example of that, you're going to, I guess, try your best. But I would think, and I say this all the time, if you have a bad experience with parents, bad mom, bad dad, whatever, if you become a parent yourself, if you choose to become a parent yourself, you do one of two things. You can either go the exact opposite route because you want to be able to give your children all the things that you were not giving yourself as a child, or you're going to think that what you got is so normal that you pass on all of that to your children because you don't know anything else. And I feel like for Vince, it was kind of more of the latter. Because again, whenever his kids talked about him, they didn't talk about him as a dad in terms of my dad did this with me. The relationship with his son is one of those main examples of Shane had his dad in his life, his entire life, and still does to an extent. But it seems like the relationship was still about business. It was about, I'm, the rough and tough dad. I got to teach you this lesson about business, about life, or whatever. And yes, the dad is supposed to do those things, but it just didn't seem like him as any affection. So Shane had left WWE and was gone for about 7 years. And then his dad calls him out of the blue and was like, what would be an amazing storyline? I'm going to pretend to give Stephanie this amazing award for being this great employer and employee, and it's going to be amazing. I'm going to like really ham it up, like, oh my gosh, you were just the epitome of the McMahon name and blah blah blah. So wouldn't it be awesome if you came out of that exact moment to basically let her know that she's not worthy of it and that I should have awarded you all along? Vince again is all about the storyline, what's going to get people excited. You know, all of the wrestlers have their own theme song. Everybody knows Shane's theme song. People have been watching this for a really long time. So all Vince is imagining in his head is how the place is going to blow up as soon as the theme song comes on. My question is, well, not my question, because I guess I know the answer. If I'm Shane, I've been gone for over 7 years. Why would I come back? Yes, you have this great storyline. That's great. I left for a reason because you weren't ready to move on. You were ready to accept my ideas. I'm not growing anymore in this company, so I need to leave and do my own thing, which is fine. He became successful on his own without wrestling. But Shane kept coming back every time Vince called him. And it's like he's still, even though he had gray hair at the time, he's a fully grown man. He is still, at the end of the day, has a little boy inside him that's still looking for approval from his father. And it's really sad that that's the case, and that may still be the case because he had this dad that wasn't didn't offer compliments easily, didn't encourage his son that easily. He just, again, had his mind focused on the business, and that was pretty much it. And if Shane wanted to do something outside of that or wanted to challenge him in any way, then it was like, okay, we don't exist anymore. Treated Shane almost like a pesky employee as opposed to his child. So when Shane came back, I was like, he you could see the tears in his eyes when his theme music came on. He came out on that stage. Everybody just went up, and I can understand being in that arena, soaking up that attention, that love when people genuinely missed you and genuinely excited to see you. And you can see the tears in his eyes like, oh my gosh, I'm back home. Because even if I have this issue with my father, issues with my family, whatever, this is the world that I grew up in, and I'm back in this world. And it's been almost a decade since I've been here. So I understood, like, oh man, this feels so great. And it was, and he said in his interview, he was like, I could see Stephanie getting choked up. I could see my dad getting a little choked up. I was like, oh, my dad's getting choked up. I don't know about all that. But basically, his character went up to Vince and was like, hey, you don't deserve this. I'm going to, I challenge you. No, Vince challenged him. He was like, if you want to take over Monday Night Raw, which is what Shane was demanding, you have to face a person of my choice. So Vince McMahon at WrestleMania, of course, had to face The Undertaker. You know, The Undertaker is? He is a huge, menacing character. He never smiles. He would come into the ring with like white contacts to look like death himself. And he's just a really big dude. Shane is not that big. But what was a beautiful moment is at WrestleMania, he comes out, and I guess which I didn't know, every time he wrestled in a baseball jersey. And he comes out, and his three sons are all wearing the same baseball jersey. And he asks his sons, you guys want to come out with me for my intro? And they've never seen their dad wrestle. They're all really young kids. They've never seen their daddy wrestle, so they came out and mimicked all of his moves. I guess when he first comes out, when his theme music comes on, he's like walking back and forth, like kind of doing little gestures, and his boys were mimicking that gesture. And I was like, that has to be such a surreal feeling for Vince to be like, wow, I am third generation in this wrestling world. And right there in front of me is my son, who is fourth generation, and my three grandsons, who are fifth generation. And they're just soaking up all of this love from the wrestling world. And I was like, I can imagine for those little boys feeling the way their dad probably did growing up, just being surrounded by that energy, by the applause and the lights and the music, and just, oh my God, I can just imagine. And I was like, that has to be so beautiful to witness. I really like that moment. Yeah, I thought it was a sweet moment. And of course, Shane didn't win. It's The Undertaker. We know how big The Undertaker is. If you know wrestling, there was no way that man was going to win. So let's talk about a little more about Shane and about his dad. And like after the match, Shane came and he and Vince shared this really big hug. And Shane was like, all I wanted him. My dad said he was proud of me, and I guess he said it in that moment. And it Vince said he was proud of him because he he has this thing of when Shane wrestles that he does things he didn't necessarily need to do. He's like jumping off really, really high, and he's doing elbows and kicks and doing all this stuff. Basically, again, it's the little boy inside of him constantly trying to impress his dad, knowing that the more outlandish he does, the more outlandish things that he does during a match, the more the crowd is going to go up for it. And that's really all Vince cares about. So it's definitely it's sad and apparent that he has that little boy inside of him that's never fully satisfied. And a lot of other wrestlers kind of comment about how Shane goes out of his way to really impress his dad. Kept coming back year after year whenever Vince would call him. I guess in hopes that, oh yeah, if I keep coming back and dad sees how committed I am, he's going to bring me back to the fold and give me a high position, which never happened. So basically, the talk comes around to Vince about retiring. He's like, no, why would I ever retire? Like, I think, what did he say? He said he has no sympathy for people that retire. Which I think is a really weird thing to say. And so now we get into all of the sexual stuff. So, from my understanding, there were basically 4 women who claimed that, like, sexual assault, sexual abuse, and trafficking. So, one woman in particular, I believe her name is Janelle Grant, she claims that she worked at the company, was not, I don't know if she was a wrestler, but either way, she worked for the company and Vince was her boss. And had, I think she said I don't know if he forced sex on her or if he just kind of made it seem like it's part of the job and you'll have job security if you do this. And in addition to that, when new wrestlers would come aboard, specifically Brock Lesnar was mentioned, and Brock Lesnar was after I stopped watching wrestling, I don't really know who he is. Apparently, he took pictures of her and sent it to Brock and was like, oh, if you come sign with WWE, this could be what you have too. So she claims that she was passed around to other wrestlers as part of her quote unquote job. And that he would send her these little text messages. So in the actual document, not document, in the actual suit that she files, there are screenshots of these text messages supposedly from Vince McMahon. So all of that is going on. And so the way the documentary is, they interviewed all of these people in like 2021, right? And then when all the allegations came up, they're like, oh, we got to re-interview people to see how they feel about the allegations. So you see some of the people came back in 2024 to kind of give their input on what is taking place. And most of the wrestlers actually didn't come back. It seemed like it was only like 2 or 3 people actually came back in 2024. And one of them was an executive of WWE. And the documentary asked him, like, oh, did you see any of the footage from what we shot for the documentary? He's like, yeah. He's like, honestly, I don't like it. And his complaint was kind of my complaint. He was like, I feel like, you guys painted Vince McMahon as a villain. You don't want to talk about his human side. And again, Vince McMahon is not going to sign off on anything unless he has, I feel like he's one of those people who has full control issues. So I'm pretty sure he was portrayed the way he wanted to be portrayed. But either way, the sex stuff, it was a lot of like specific numbers, like 3 million here, 200,000 there. Total allegations, $12 million were given to 4 different women over the span of 16 years, including, some of the stuff includes coercion of oral sex, assaulting a tanning salon employee, and I guess I mean, yeah. And so he officially retired in July 2022. And that's where I got kind of confused. He officially retired in July 2022. Then he came back for some reason and kind of alluded to the fact that he felt he was pressured to retire. Even though, again, all these allegations are happening right now. So I feel like I would retire or at least just step away just so it's not tainting wrestling at all. And he basically came back. And when he came back, his daughter Stephanie resigned as the co-CEO in January 2023. I think she didn't want to be affiliated with his drama anymore. And I don't know. And of course, she wasn't back to get re-interviewed in 2024. Now it was Triple H. So there's no way to know what the current relationship is with Vince McMahon and his kids right now. I can make my own assumptions, but who knows? So WWE was sold with the UFC in a merger. All that, I didn't understand any of that legally stuff. And I mean, that's kind of it. Everything is still up in the air because all this stuff is just recently. But after they talked about all the legal stuff going on, they asked the wrestlers, what do you think Vince McMahon's legacy is going to be? and one person just said the most important figure in the history of wrestling, which I think is fair. Good, bad, or indifferent, he has done a lot for the sport, for the entertainment of wrestling. And Vince said people don't really, this is the last quote I have, the last thing I have about him. Vince said people really don't know him. He describes himself as sexually active and someone who needs to be challenged. And he said he often blurs the line himself between what's the character and what is him. So this is what I'll say. That's kind of how it ends. For this docuseries, if I had to rate it, I don't rate it as a whole as opposed to rating each individual episode. Out of, let's say, 10, I'd give it a 5, maybe a 6. I think that obviously it's very specific to people who are wrestling fans, who are very familiar with these people. I think that it has a good nostalgia factor for people who have or continue to watch wrestling, because obviously you're going to see wrestlers that you grew up with. You're going to be reminded of some storylines that you're like, oh, I forgot that happened. No, I remember this character. Blah, blah. So I think for nostalgia's sake, it gives it the 5. Um, Maybe a 6, only because there were some interesting pieces in there. I told you guys my main complaints about it. I feel like I still don't really know who Vince McMahon is as a person. I think it does kind of paint him as a villain, even though everyone says, oh, he's like a father to me. He was like a father figure pretty much to all of the wrestlers, at least all the male wrestlers. I don't know. I just feel like it was a lot missing from this. I feel like I don't know if it needed to be 6 full episodes either. I think that kind of was overkill. We didn't need to hear about every single WrestleMania. Some of these could have definitely been condensed, I think. But yeah, I'd give it an overall. I'll say I'll be generous and I'll give it a 6 out of 10. That is my rating and my ranking. Thank you guys so much for watching this whole series with me, or just watching my series. I think I'm going to make this a thing because I love watching documentaries as much as I do. So I think that I'll continue to just talk about documentaries and review and recap them for you guys, whether it's a docu-series or a documentary, we'll see. And if there are any other shows that are out there, as a reminder, the streaming platforms that I have HBO Max, I have Showtime, Hulu, Netflix, and Amazon. So if you know of any really good documentaries on any of those streaming platforms, or just a good show, it could be a show, it could be maybe not a movie, a documentary or a TV show that you'd like me to recap, leave it in the comments below. Because I have time, I am normally looking for new things, so just let me know what you guys find. And yeah, thank you guys again. Make sure, again, you comment below, like this video, share the video, and make sure you subscribe to my channel. And I'll see you guys soon. Peace.